Kindiki to state the measures put in place to ensure the restoration as well as maintenance of peace in the region and provide information on the recruitment, matters deployment and remuneration of the National Police Reservists, popularly known as NPR in the region. Finally, Cabinet Secretary for Interior will also be required to tell the Senate the status of the recovery of stolen livestock and arraignment of apprehended bandits in court since November 2022, and could the government consider compensating persons affected in the banditry. In relation to matters banditry, Professor Kithure Kindiki will also be telling the Senate the measures that have been put in place to curb the abuse of ketamine, an addictive drug popularly known as kete, particularly in the Mount Kenya region, as well as efforts the ministry has made in the establishment of rehabilitation facilities for recovering addicts of the drug. The business of the Senate is just about to commence. Senate Speaker Honorable Amason Kingi is presiding over the business of the Senate this morning. Allow me to hand over for the live proceedings of this particular live broadcast. Enjoy your viewing.
Favor and blessings as your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you've committed to our church. Amen. Clerk, do we have quorum? Sergeant at Arms, kindly ring the quorum bell for 10 minutes.
The Speaker of the Senate, Honorable Amason Kingi, has directed the Sergeant at Arms to ring the quorum bell of the House to give some more a leeway of 10 minutes to allow senators within the presence of Parliament and those yet to make their way into the chamber this morning to do exactly that, to raise the quorum required for the House to commence business. This particular directive that is guiding the Speaker is pursuant to standing orders of the Senate on matters quorum. Allow me to take you through some of the highlights in the order of business this morning. Before the House officially commenced business this morning, I was taking you through some of the questions that the Cabinet Secretary, Professor Kithure Kindiki, the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, will be required to answer to senators this morning. And the Senator for Marsabit County, Honorable Senator Mohamed Chute, will be asking the Cabinet Secretary for East African Community and arid and semi-arid lands and matters regional development to provide a list of the relief food distribution programs currently being run across the country, indicating the types of food being distributed as well as the quantity of the packages. Honorable Rebecca Miano will also be required to tell senators who are the suppliers of the relief food under these programs from 2017 to date, and could the Cabinet Secretary also state the amount paid to the respective suppliers as well as indicate the pending bills accrued, if any. The Cabinet Secretary will also be explaining the tendering process used to award the tenders and provide details of the type of food products procured and the price per unit in respect to the current programs. Honorable Moses Kuria, the Cabinet Secretary for Matters Trade and Investment, is also set to appear before Senate this morning. The Cabinet Secretary will be required to answer to senators the state as well as type and quantity of goods being imported by corporations and individuals pre-qualified by the Kenya National Training Corporation, popularly known as KNTC. Honorable Moses Kuria will also be telling senators in plenary this morning what is the procedure used by the Kenya National Trading Corporation in identifying and pre-qualifying companies which imported goods, and could the Cabinet Secretary state how many were awarded businesses, those currently importing goods, as well as indicate the type and packaging for these commodities being imported, and this is during the financial year 2021, 2022, as well as 2022 and 2023. Senators keep making their way into the chamber this morning to allow the senators raise the numbers this morning. The Senate has raised the quorum. Allow me to hand you for the live broadcast.
The Chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Honorable Senators, if you look at the order paper, there are 4 questions that have been listed for response by the relevant CSS. Question number 11, questions number 12. Those 2 were directed to the CS Interior. However, we received a letter informing the Senate that the CS will not be present today for purposes of responding to these 2 questions. That letter was found unsatisfactory, and another letter was sent by the clerk to the office of the CS informing him that he has to be present today. Despite that letter, the CS is not present. And therefore, understanding Order 51D, where if a CS fails to appear for purposes of responding to these questions and does not give any satisfactory reason as to why they have failed to appear, then a motion of censure shall ensue. In this regard, this matter is going to be discussed during the special SBC tomorrow Thursday, and the Senate will be advised accordingly after this matter is discussed at the special SBC tomorrow. Now, that also applies to question number 15. Last night, we received a letter from the CS Investment and Trade indicating that he will not be able to appear before the Senate for purposes of responding to this question. Again, no satisfactory reason was contained in that particular letter, and therefore the same will be discussed during tomorrow's special SBC for purposes of invoking Standing Order 51D. Again, after the matter is discussed, the Senate will be advised accordingly. That therefore leaves us with only one question. That is question number 14. Clerk, is this? Kenya, are you raising a point of clarification? Because I do not see how the chair is out of order for you to bring him back to order. Proceed.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for guiding. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with you because the Cabinet Secretary Interior, for the purpose of question 11 and 12, we have rescheduled this question twice. And I want to agree with you that you did write letters yesterday, and that's why we are here. Mr. Speaker, I think the Cabinet Secretaries are not taking this House seriously. So I would recommend when you are dealing with this matter at SBC, Mr. Speaker, you must be firm so that we can invoke the Standing Order 51D. So, Mr. Speaker, I agree with you and I support your decision. Thank you.
The clerk, is the CS for East African Community and ASAL present? Can you usher them in the rightful place? Thank you. I'm informed that the CS in charge of East African Community and ASAL is present for purposes of responding to question number 14. Let me take this opportunity to welcome the CS to the Senate. Thank you so much, Madam CS, for honoring the invitation to come and answer the question that has been posed by the Honorable Senator from Marsabit. I will straight away proceed to request the Senator from Marsabit to ask the question.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Thank you very much, Madam Cabinet Secretary. I have 3 questions to ask. A, could the Cabinet Secretary state the type and quantity of goods being imported by corporations? No, sorry. This is a wrong, sorry. This is a wrong question. If
Senator, you don't know your question.
Mr. Speaker, they are both mine, so it's a mix-up.
You are asking question number 014.
Yes, I got it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed, Senator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I repeat now. Question A, could the Cabinet Secretary provide a list of the relief food distribution programs currently being run across the country, indicating the types of food being distributed and the quantity of package? B, who are the suppliers of relief food under this program from 2017 to date? And could the Cabinet Secretary state the amount paid to the respective suppliers and indicate the pending bills accrued, if any? C, could the Cabinet Secretary explain the tendering process used to award the tenders and provide details of types of food products procured and the price per unit in respect of the current programs? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable CS, can you proceed to respond?
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker and honorable members. I'm glad to be here this morning to discuss matters that are important and pertain to our nation. Mr. Speaker, sir, for the purpose of clarity and for the sake of providing general context to the question by Senator Mohammed Said Chute of Marsabit County, allow me, and I wish to capture very briefly the scope of the ministry I serve as Cabinet Secretary. And the Ministry of East Africa Community, Arid and Semi-Arid Lands and Regional Development has two state departments, namely the State Department of East Africa Community and the State Department of Arid and Semi-Arid Lands and Regional Development. The matter in focus here today falls under the State Department of Arid and Semi-Arid Lands and Regional Development, and more specifically in the general realm of the ASALs and special programs. And Right Honorable Speaker, the Kenya's ASALs currently occupy landmass approximated at 85%. Some estimates place the percentage as high as 89%. What is not in doubt, however, is that even the most conservative estimates put the Kenya's ASALs at 80% of the entire territory at the very least. This, by any standard, is a huge landmass that can no longer be accorded casual attention with regard to socio-economic planning. In recent years, driven by climate change-related reasons and not regarded, the areas regarded as semi-arid lands have joined the League of ASALs, even if they were not ASALs before. And Honorable Speaker, at least 200 of Kenya's 290 constituencies are now either arid or semi-arid lands. And the ASALs are home to about 40, 70, and 90% of Kenya's human population, livestock, and wildlife, respectively.
Senator Boni, you cannot stand on a point of order when the CS is on her feet. You cannot. And CS, proceed, but please go straight to respond to the questions as asked. I have been listening attentively here, but you've not even started to respond to the questions. Kindly go straight to respond to the questions as asked by the Senator, please.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The Senator for Marsabit, Mohammed Said Chute, has asked the Cabinet Secretary for East Africa Community, ASALs, and Regional Development to provide a list of the relief food distribution programs currently run across the country, indicating the types of food being distributed and the quantity of package. The ministry runs relief programs through the National Drought Management Authority and the Directorate of Special Programs. The Directorate of Special Programs relief food interventions are categorized into two. Number one is the relief food distribution, and number two is the humanitarian emergency response. Under the relief food distribution, dry foodstuffs are provided to vulnerable households affected either by drought or other disasters. The food items are procured and distributed to households based on affected population, severity of the drought at the point of need, nutritional requirement, tracking distance, among others. And currently, the ministry is procuring rice and beans only. The prolonged drought affected maize production, thus creating scarcity in the market, while global geopolitics, especially the Russia-Ukraine conflict, affected the global supply chain for vegetable oil. For fortified food, the base raw material used is maize flour, whose production was severely affected by the prolonged drought. And according to the guidelines and procedures for the management of relief food distribution in Kenya, the following committees are responsible at various levels: the State Department for Relief Food Committee, County Steering Group Relief Food Committee, Sub-County Relief Food Committee, the Ward Relief Food Committee, Local Relief Food Committee, and Sub-Location Relief Committee, and finally, Village Relief Food Committee. And the following are the food items that are procured. Number one is rice that is packaged in 50 kg bags. Number two, beans, also packaged in 50 kg bags. Number three is maize, also in 50 kg bags. Number four, vegetable oil, which is a carton that contains 12 1-liter packaging. And finally, fortified food bales of 25 kgs each. But like I have said, we are currently only dealing with rice and beans. So that is the relief food program. The next program we have is the humanitarian emergency response. And this is non-food commodities that are provided to households affected by various disasters. The non-food commodities portfolio comprises mainly iron sheets, timber, ridges, nails assorted. We have mattresses, blankets, kitchen sets, jikos, gas lamps, tents and tarpaulins, soaps, and sanitary towels. And worth taking note of is that the ministry did not get an allocation for relief supplies in the current and now ending financial year. However, we requested for allocation as and when the need arises. Under the National Drought Management Authority, it supports non-food programs to mitigate the effects of drought through cash transfers and safety nets program. They also do water tracking and provision of livestock feeds. NDMA also coordinates relief food distribution by private sector-led initiatives and some development partner initiatives. The cash transfers are sourced from commercial banks. Water tracking services are mainly driven by community water users associations, while livestock feeds are competitively sourced locally through open tendering process. Honorable Speaker, we have provided finer details in the appendices of all the programs that have been in place, and they are available as appendices. On question number B, the question is, who are the suppliers of relief food under these programs from 2017 to date? And could the Cabinet Secretary state the amount paid to the respective suppliers and indicate the pending bills accrued, if any? Honorable Speaker, regarding the period spanning 2017 to October 2021 and also October to January 2023, This particular query was redirected to the State Department for Devolution and the State Department for Social Protection and Senior Affairs for competent adjudication and response, because this function was only transferred to my ministry through the Executive Order number 1 of January 2023, and we have only handled this function for the last 5 months or so. Honorable Speaker, the ministry did not then inherit any pending bills as far as relief supply is concerned, while payments to the current suppliers for the 5 months is ongoing because delivery and supplies continue. We have, however, provided a list in the appendix of the suppliers that are sourced through the supply branch. On question number C, could the Cabinet Secretary explain the tendering process used to award the tenders and provide details of the types of food products procured and the price per unit in respect of the current programs? Mr. Speaker, sir, the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development, through the State Department of Public Works, that is Supplies Branch Department, pre-qualifies contractors for supplies of goods and services to various government ministries, departments, and agencies every 2 years or as and when it is necessary. The Ministry of EAC, the Asals and Regional Development uses the list of pre-qualified contractors to identify appropriate suppliers for various commodities for the relief programs. The Supplies Branch Agreement referenced as a contract number 53 of 8 that was dated January 2023 was issued, and the details of the framework contracts of supply and delivery of dry foods is also attached, and it has about 400 or so providers. The procurement and relief food and humanitarian emergency response commodities are based on the provision of Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act of 2015 and as guided by the supply branch. The types of food products that were procured from January to May, when this department was in my docket, was rice, Sindano grade, of 50 kgs, and the cost in January was 7,250. The beans, various types, packaged in 50 kg bags, and the price was 7,500. Maize, we did not purchase, and also vegetable oils and other fortified foods. In terms of the tendering process, in accordance with the provisions of the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act and the aforementioned circular from Supply Branch, the State Department for Asals and Regional Development adopted the contract framework. The ministry also utilizes provided tendering procedures and methods for sourcing relief food, and the methods are open tendering, restricted, direct, request for proposal, and requests for quotation. As noted, Kenya experienced the worst drought in 40 years, and the biting drought rendered many people food insecure, and there was urgent need of relief assistance. So with that in mind, and with limited resources, we looked at the market and the prices that were set by the supplies branch, and we managed to bring down the cost, the delivery cost, and therefore we managed to get some rice at 4,500 per 50 kg bag, compared to the 7,250. We also managed to get the second lot of the rice at 5,250 compared to the initial 7,250. And for the beans, because of the scarcity, we were only able to bring it down to 7,300 from the initial 7,500. I submit, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Sears. Honorable Senator Chute, understanding Order 51C7A, you have an opportunity to ask 2 supplementary questions. You may elect to ask one and then be the very last senator to ask the second question. If you've been responded to satisfactorily, you may not even elect to ask any question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would ask one question first, and then the other one at the last of the session. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to thank the CS, first of all, for having the courage to reduce the price from 7,200 for rice 50 kg to 4,500. And also the beans from 7,500 to 7,300. I think she should work on the beans and see if she can get at a lesser price. But then my question goes to the, Madam CS. The documents we have here before this Honorable House is from KNTC, and it shows that they've supplied or they've imported rice and edible oil. Did you contact KNTC to see if you can get a better price? If yes, how much are they selling at? Thank you.
Honorable Sears.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and honorable members. I wish to confirm that we did contact KNTC, and the price we got for rice and the beans was slightly higher. The rice was, I don't have the actual figures, but I can firmly confirm that the prices were slightly higher. Thank you.
Senator Dulo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank CS on her elaborate response to the question asked by Senator Chute. And I must thank Senator Chute for bringing this statement. My question, Mr. Speaker, number one, CS, the food is actually dumped at the DC's headquarters. And the procedure that has been there before, there must be a budgetary allocation to ensure that the food reaches the communities. But unfortunately, over the years, and I think I had followed it up with a special program before it was handed over to you, we have about 4 or 5 months that you have not provided allocation of the budget to the DCCs. Number two, Mr. Speaker, I remember there was a time views were collected on the ground where instead of giving food to individuals, you give cash transfer. And that is better transparent and better useful to the communities affected. Why can't you use cash transfer as a government instead of providing food that doesn't even reach people, especially the beans? It takes even 3-4 hours to ripe. Mr. Speaker, I would request CS, can you get a better beans for the communities instead of using the current supply? I thank you.
Honorable CS, kindly proceed to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, I'll take the question by Honorable Fatma, and this is in regard to the last mile arrangement for relief food distribution. And this is normally through the county steering group that is co-chaired by the county commissioner and the governor, with membership from Ministry of Interior and other stakeholders. But specifically on the transport, we have given an appendix starting from February to show that the arid counties then received an AIE of 200,000. The semi-arid received 100,000 per sub-county, and the non-ASAL, non-traditional ASALs that were affected got an AIE of 50,000. And we continue to perfect this to ensure that by the time the food arrives at the last mile or at the sub-county, that amount is available because it is for distribution and transport. So from February to May, I have the data to show that we are matching the food distribution and the amount for transport. But in regard to your second question on cash transfer, I couldn't agree with you more. I do agree that cash transfers are efficient, effective, dignified, and we do have that under the National Drought Management Authority, that is the Hunger Safety Net Program and World Food Program, and some of the development partners already have that program. I wish to assure you that this is work in progress so that going forward, we reduce as much as possible the relief food distribution and revert to cash transfer, which gives households convenience, dignity, and variety. And we shall give this, the technical teams, we will give them the urgency and the importance that this assignment requires. And I will be glad to update the House at the appropriate time the progress made towards achieving much more of cash transfers than relief food distribution. I submit, Honorable Speaker.
Senator Seki.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you for this opportunity, and I want to appreciate the Cabinet Secretary. I want to ask a question in regards to question 2 on supply of relief food under this program, as asked by Senator Chute. I look at the response as Cabinet Secretary, and I see it is not really satisfactory because you took over and we need to have a list of suppliers, because during the period between December and even January, February, up to almost April, that is the time we were in the peak of supplies of food, relief food, to counties by your department. And I look forward to see the list of supplies as asked by the senator, because your ministry was supplying food, and that is the time we had a
Senator,
very
what
drought.
is your question, Senator?
We had
Proceed to ask your question.
I want to request the cabinet secretary to give us a list of suppliers of this relief food during the period of between February to almost May, because that was the peak of the drought in your ministry. Thank you.
Honorable CS. The question is, could you provide a list of those suppliers, especially for that period when drought was at its peak?
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The contracts are still ongoing, supplies are still ongoing, but I have the list here. We'll submit. Yeah.
What is your point of order, Senator Dulo? And I hope you're not raising a point of order against the CS, because that you cannot do.
No, it's, Mr. Speaker, it's one part of my question she didn't answer, the one on beans. Thank you.
Thank you. As you respond to the question from Senator Cheptumo, Honorable CS will also kindly shed light on why you're supplying beans that take 4 to 5 hours to cook. That was the, was that the question? That was your concern, Senator Fatuma? Good. Senator Cheptumo.
Let me, Mr. Speaker, thank the CS for the comprehensive answer to the questions raised by Senator Chute. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the fact that the ministry does good supplies to the various counties of the relief foods. But, Mr. Speaker, the challenge that we have, and I have witnessed myself, having been the former member of Parliament, Baringo North, is that there is a challenge of these supplies reaching the targeted population. From the county headquarters to the sub-counties, some of these supplies, Mr. Speaker, disappear somewhere, somehow. I wanted to know from the minister or the CS, what measures have you put in place to ensure that the food supplies actually reaches the targeted people, so that you avoid these middle people who sometimes, Mr. Speaker, the DCs, the DOs, and the chiefs sometimes divert these supplies to other beneficiaries. What measures, Madam CS, have you put in place to ensure that the targeted communities are actually availed the food? Finally, Chair, the Speaker,
Senator Cheptumo.
is related.
Understanding Order 51C7B.
Okay, Chair. Oh, okay, Speaker, it's okay. It's okay. Okay.
Honorable CS, kindly proceed to respond to Senator Cheptumo's question, as you also respond to an earlier question by Senator Dula. Proceed, kindly.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. In regard to the question by Honorable Fatuma, that is in regard to beans. Honorable Speaker, we haven't received a complaint about the beans for now, and also noting that maize that takes longer we haven't distributed right now. However, I want to focus on the future outlook, and I would wish to say that we will continue on working on cash transfers so that communities and vulnerable people can then sample what else is easier to cook and available in the market, and also undertake a survey on the alternative relief food or dry foods that may have the same protein and may be available. And so we would like to take that away and have a suggestion and see what alternative protein would be available. In regard to the question, in response to the question by Honorable Cheptumo about the last miles, we use the county steering groups to target the affected and vulnerable population following the reports by the National Drought Management Authority. And then these groups that are co-chaired by the county commissioners and the governor and memberships from the Ministry of Interior and National Administration, the county government, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, Ministry of Health. This committee has multi-sectoral participants who target. And then in terms of distribution, when we allocate relief food, we write to the county commissioner, we copy all the leaders, elected leaders and administration leaders, and this is to ensure higher accountability and so that we have enough people participating and getting the documentation and also witnessing this distribution. We would like to perfect this further, and as a ministry, being the accounting ministry, we had made a proposal to have officers that are based on the ground, but that is work in progress, and the Public Service Commission is still considering our request. But Mr. Speaker, we want to assure you that the message we have is of high accountability and to ensure that the relief food gets to the right people and to the last person who is vulnerable and is deserving of this relief food. And we will continue to follow up and take the responsibility with the seriousness it deserves. I submit, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Aaron Cheriot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to laud the Cabinet Secretary for her diligence and just note the communication that you gave earlier. Something curious to note, Mr. Speaker, is that the Cabinet Secretaries who have not previously served in Parliament with us are more responsive to calls to this House than our colleagues who used to be there. And it's rather embarrassing of our former colleagues who treat this House with not so much decency. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Cabinet Secretary is that the Commission for Revenue Allocation, 3 or 4 years ago, updated government records on the classification of arid and semi-arid areas. Previously, as you know, Mr. Speaker, arid and semi-arid areas were large geographical areas, perhaps you'd say to the north of the country and certain parts of the country. However, CRA commissioned a study and classified and divided the country into wards, which is a well-known administrative units in the country that pass the test of what you'd classify them as arid and semi-arid areas. I continue to see ministries, unfortunately, including her ministry, who still stick with what was a former classification of what will be arid and semi-arid areas, and therefore even in the distribution of relief food, share it only with the traditional arid areas. When is the Cabinet Secretary going to update the records of her ministry so that you find a county like Meru, where my neighbor here comes from, they have very fertile parts of the country, that's given. But then if you go upwards to the areas that they border, like Kipia, those are definitely very arid parts. The same can be said of my own county, Mr. Speaker. So I want to find out and know from the Cabinet Secretary when her ministry will update this information so that food distribution and relief drought mitigation programs can reflect the new definitions that have been issued by Commission for Revenue Allocation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable CS.
Thank you once more, Honorable Speaker. And the question by Senator Cheruiyot. I would like to start by saying the original classification of the arid and semi-arid counties or lands was done by CALRO, the Research, Agricultural and Livestock Research Organization, among other stakeholders, and that is the classification that has been there. We also note the classification by the Revenue Allocation Commission. I would wish to state that during the drought that we have just had, we went out of the classification and looked at the practical data of the counties and the people who were affected by drought. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to confirm that we had 9 non-ASAL counties whose wards, about 45 wards, were affected, and there were pockets that were affected by the drought, but they were not in the classification by CALRO or CRA, but we used contemporary data and contemporary occurrences that we saw. Mr. Speaker, sir, the data we have shows that we distributed food in all corners that were affected. Going forward, we will work with CALRO, the Commission of Revenue Allocation, so that looking at the effects of climate change, the lessons we have learned during the devastating drought, we can get new classifications, updated classifications, so that as we work on programs, sustainable programs for ending drought emergencies and for sustainability in the arid and semi-arid lands, we are then using contemporary classification. And Mr. Speaker, the drought we have suffered is the worst in 40 years, and we have a lot of valuable lessons learned, and we do believe, because of the climate change, this will recur, and we need, from now going forward, from day one, to start preparing for any future occurrence and avoiding some of the emergencies that we got into. So I want to assure Senator Cheruiyot that we are already on course, and we were not restricted by the classification that was on record during the drought. I submit.
Senator Kinyua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to join my colleagues in thanking the CS for coming. Mr. Speaker, it beats logic, because most of the time when I look at the news, you will see some areas, or the Azores areas, people are suffering from hunger. But on the same breath, Mr. Speaker, you look at other parts of this country. For example, you look at Osingishu, look at some parts of Laikipia. People have bumper harvest. What I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, or what I'm encouraging the Cabinet Secretary, why don't we buy locally instead of having this rice being imported? And we have our farmers in Moya who keeps on complaining about the low prices, Mr. Speaker. You go to Osingishu, the same thing, Mr. Speaker, the prices of maize. You come to Laikipia, we can provide protein from our animals, then we can have canned meat. And that, Mr. Speaker, the prices that we are getting would be less and will provide more food to our people. Mr. Speaker, I want to confirm that the Cabinet Secretary, the way she's answering questions, she has given details. I want to confirm she's the daughter of Laikipia, and we are proud of her. Thank you.
Honorable CS, proceed to respond to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Senator Kinyua has said that some areas produce more food while other areas have a shortage, which is true. But during the drought, this last drought and the very worst drought, Kenya was a net importer of food, and especially rice and beans and other commodities. We are net importers. But back to his point, there is work that needs to be done by multi-sectoral players, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Water, various government and non-state actors, to come up with county food balance sheets and come up with an exercise that will even bring back reserve food quantities so that in future that food can be stored, that food can be available, and that we can manage the shortages in some counties by getting from other counties. And I will also say again, that is an assignment worth taking by the multi-sectoral players in this food security sector, where my ministry is also involved and also very interested in the outcome of such an exercise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mogo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate the Cabinet Secretary for the way she is handling the questions. My question is, in counties such as West Pokot, Turkana, and the others, during the times of disturbances such as cattle rustling and so on, there is a lot of shifting from area to area. And in the process of that, a lot of school-going children are mislocated or go without food and so on. What intercepting measures can the ministry take on such issues? Thank you.
Honorable CS.
Honorable Speaker and honorable members, during the drought, we also had counties that experienced insecurity, and those counties were then classified as operational counties. We continued to provide relief food under the guidance of the ministry.
Majority Leader, just hold on, CS. Majority Leader, you're out of order. You cannot just cross from one side to the other. You know exactly. You go to the line, bow, and take a seat. So you'll get your first question of the day. Proceed, CS.
So the operational areas, we continued to provide relief food guided by the security team, and even the delivery was supervised by the security. For the school-going children that were affected, I am aware that we have a school feeding program under the Ministry of Education, but my State Department has complemented and supplemented that work. And Mr. Speaker, just this week, I think on Monday, we had a meeting to discuss the same issue, how to support the school children that are affected by the peace operations and the lack of security. More importantly, we are aware some of this insecurity is just competition for limited resources, lack of development. And again, we need multi-sectoral teams to work on how to spur development and provision of resources. Just today, I have shared in the newspaper, one of the newspapers, my article on reimagining peace in the arid and semi-arid lands that is co-authored with the Interior team. And we would, going forward as a country, and even in line with the manifesto and the plan, just taking development to all corners of the world, of the land, all corners of Kenya, so that the arid and semi-arid lands that are more known for lack of peace are then promoted to the same level of development as the rest of the country. And I do believe issues of insecurity, other challenges that are encountered for lack of resources and development will either be minimized or eradicated altogether. Again, it's exciting to work in this ministry and participate in some of these discussions and strategies, because it is life-changing and impactful when we see some of these issues being resolved and removing the arsals from where they are seen as areas that lack water, that lack peace, that lack security, that lack development, to areas that are contributing significantly to the development of this country, and the Kenyan people in the arid and semi-arid lands can enjoy the same level of development and peace that some of the other parts of the country do enjoy. I thank you.
Senator Matinga.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. Let me also start by thanking the Madam CS for ably responding to all the questions. My question would be, Mr. Speaker, sir, this having been a drought that was the worst in the last 40 years, what is the ministry doing in order to ensure that we develop strategic reserves, that we develop post-harvest management issues, so that we do not lose a lot of food when we have bumper harvest only a couple of years down the line to use a lot of money to mitigate the drought measures? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. In response to Honorable Wamatinga, what you have said is really true. We need strategic reserves. The Ministry of Agriculture, I am aware, I've seen their documentation, their strategies, and we are following up with them to implement the strategies. We are giving the data. We are being the ministry in charge of policy for their SALs, we are sharing the policies, our strategic plans, we are sharing data so that it can be an input not only to the Ministry of Agriculture, but to all the other ministries. Because the ASALs, every ministry has one or two things to do in regard to the ASALs. The Ministry of Water and Irrigation, I attended the launch of their strategy. I saw their plans on water harvesting, the shift from rain-fed agriculture to irrigation. And so we would like to follow up with the ministries, and we continue this discussion so that we have strategic food reserves. And next time there is a drought, in the years to come, it will be much better than what we experienced in the latest drought. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Lominan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate Madam CS. My question, Mr. Speaker, I come from the farthest corner of this country, areas like Kibich, areas like Kapedo. So my question is, how do the ministry ensure those rural areas that do have the problem of infrastructure consider to make sure they have received food? What I know, the food leaves from Nairobi to counties, sub-counties. When it reaches to the sub-county, it takes time. And I'm very sure more than 6 months, more than 3 months to reach to those rural areas. And the reason for that is because when you ask the county commissioner, he tells you he has not been facilitated. What Madam CS has said, 200,000 for the ASAL areas. That funds is not enough because to transport food from here, even to Kapengura, to Lodwa, is worth more than that 200,000. So what happens when it reaches to the headquarters of the sub-county? It ends there. They wait, what they do, they sell that food again to facilitate themselves to reach the areas of where it's supposed to reach. So what plans do you have to ensure the most vulnerable people from rural areas receive this food instead of targeting people from just the headquarters in towns?
Honorable Sears.
Honorable Speaker and also Honorable Lomenen, I would like to confirm that during the drought, I managed to go to Turkana 4 times, to the most interior part, and even for relief food distribution. We have transport arrangements. We get escorts from KDF and the other authorities. And lately, we are also using government vehicles. But I would like to clarify about the 200,000. The 200,000 is for fuel for the sub-county level, not for the transport in totality per county or per area. So that is to ensure that the food reaches where it's supposed to be. You mentioned that probably food is sold to get funds for transport. I haven't experienced that in the 5 months that I have handled this assignment. Maybe there would be need to segregate maybe historical issues if they were there. But for the last 5 months, I have seen smooth transportation of food. And we use all means that we can to ensure that food reaches to the innermost parts of the country and of the counties that are affected. We work very closely with the Ministry of Interior and the Ngao officers. But like I said before, work in progress, always improving, always making it better. And that is the mindset we are having as a state department. But of course, if there is infrastructure development in these counties in the long run, the challenges we are having of transport, other challenges, will be minimized and eradicated eventually. So it is a good future to look at or to anticipate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Lilegwe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the response, the comprehensive response from the Cabinet Secretary, both for the primary questions and the four supplementary questions being asked at the floor. Mr. Speaker, we all agree that this was the worst drought as reported in the last 40 years. But I've heard the Cabinet Secretary say that the people who are affected, meaning that the impact or the effects of the drought is over. But I cannot agree with that because with the pastoralists or the livestock-dependent communities of Kenya are still affected by this drought. One, because of the depleted numbers of their livestock, which they depend on, and also these livestock are still weak. So my question to the Cabinet Secretary is, what measures is the Cabinet Secretary considering to ensure constant supply of emergency relief aid for these communities in ASAL areas that are still affected despite the rains, which have not changed the situation in Kenya or in these communities that depend on livestock? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable CS.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll respond to the question by Honorable Alawe. It is true that Kenya has experienced the worst drought. It is also true that the effects of the drought are not over. It takes quite a long time to recover from such a drought. Following the rains that we have had, we have seen slight improvement. We have seen the vegetation regenerating, giving quite a bit of feed to the livestock, water available, but the effects of the drought are still with us. And if we receive enough rain, it will still take probably even more than 6 months to get the much needed relief. So despite the little improvement or the improvement that we have seen from the rains, which we thank God for, I want to confirm that the relief food program is still on, and there is constant relief food distribution, including currently, even as we sit here, and we will continue to support the communities that require the support until we get significant recovery. We do not have enough funds, but with the little funds or the funds available, the National Drought Management Authority has had several strategies to support recovery, restocking to some of the worst hit areas that lost almost an entire livestock, and that is ongoing with support from some of the development partners, and we continue to support in regard to the relief food. And we are also spending a significant amount of our time looking at sustainable ways of managing droughts or ending droughts. And we have a whole activity and discussions that are going on. We have support from development partners. And I want to assure the honorable member that the program is still on and recovery is not yet complete. Thank you.
Senator Mgatana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues in acknowledging the thoroughness of this particular cabinet secretary. It has inspired confidence that we got the right person amongst the Kenyans who are listening, including myself. So keep it up. And I also want to acknowledge our very own son from Tana River,
the permanent secretary. I see him there. I know he's part of the team that are producing good caliber work that we are proud of. Mr. Speaker, my question to the PS, to the CS, is whether they have planned for future droughts, because the drought cycle in Tana River County, and I dare say the rest of Kenya, is predictable. So we want to know whether they have done some forward thinking to mitigate the effects of that drought. I have in mind, Mr. Speaker, whether the ministry has planned for, say, procurement of the bells of grass that is useful and good food for animals during drought, whether they have thought, and I'm particularly speaking of Tana River County, because that's where animals from Marsabit, animals from Isiolo, they come during the drought season. So whether the ministry has done forward planning so that we have these bells of grass that can sustain livestock during the difficult times. That is on the side of livestock, because I've not had much on that side, but also on the human side, whether they have planned to secure food reserves for the people so that we don't have embarrassing situations like Kenyans dying of lack of food. I'm speaking for my county and by extension to the rest of the nation. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable CS.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Senator Mungatana. Compliments are rare, but appreciated. I want to say that one of the documents we are working on is a strategy called Ending Drought Emergencies Strategy, and this is the second phase. We had one that just expired in December, and in this strategy, we are focusing on resilience building, coming up with strategies, programs, and projects that in future will alleviate droughts. Because, Mr. Speaker, with the climate change and the devastating effects of climate change, droughts are not getting better. Lands are not getting better, and the climate, it's only planning that can get better. And we are hoping to launch by 1st of July the Ending Drought Emergencies Strategy. And this is supported by development partners. When we launch it, we will then embark on execution and implementation. And we do look forward to a team that has the discipline of execution. And in terms of food reserves, the Ministry of Agriculture comes in to this particular docket. I have looked at their proposals, not only the Ministry of Agriculture, but the current administration's manifestos and plans on agriculture, which we are all aware. And we look forward to the fruition of these plans and the activities that are going on to promote agriculture, the large scale, the proposals to have food reserves. So all these activities are to position us better in the future droughts, because they will surely come. But we do hope that the country, the communities and the counties, and even ministries, and all of us will be much better placed to handle that. One of the mandates for these state departments is livestock development in the arid and semi-arid lands. We are coming up with newer programs for fodder, the fodder programs. We have proposals on livestock transformation. We have one particular program that is supported by various development partners. And we are almost at the tail end of the proposals that will come through. We have come up with a steering committee, which we have put together, and we believe of big thinkers, strategic thinkers, to think with us and see how we can transform the livestock sector in the arid and semi-arid lands, taking cognizance of the fact that this was one of the most affected sectors during this drought. And so we are looking at fodder commercialization so that we have more fodder available. We are looking at better breeds of animals. We are looking at just the vaccinations. We are looking at what more commercialization we can work with communities so that they can also look at livestock as part of the commercial development in the arid and semi-arid lands. And I think going forward, I am certain and I believe that some of these proposals, or most of them, will bear good fruit to face future droughts with better resilience, not only for communities or the people part of it, but the livestock, the wildlife, and every other sector that is ordinarily affected by the drought. I thank you.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want first to commend the CS for the wonderful and competencies as answering her questions. Two, I want to ask the CS that the food distribution is done through sub-counties. And you know, some areas have more sub-counties than others. And one sub-county may have more population than another one. But the food is actually done across the board. So I think there's a lot of disparity in food distribution in that because of the population differences and the sub-county difference, depending on, you know, the severity of the drought. One other thing, Madam Speaker, is that because of seepage and because of transportation, the cost of delivering food is just too high. A bag maybe that cost you around 7,000 shillings might cost, when it reaches the end, of almost 15,000 shillings. I know your ministry doing cash transfer through under the hunger safety program. When you give about 4 or 5 kilos, it might take a family 3 days, 4 days. But when you give them cash, they will be able to manage themselves, and it will be cheaper for the ministry or for the government. And then giving, you know, maize and beans alone or oil. So what plan do you have to transfer instead of the food? Because of the high cost, you go to, you know, now even the non-state actors, like NGOs, are now starting back to cash transfer. So what is your plan for, because relief food is not sustainable and you cannot continue throughout. Is this unnecessary costly? Two, it is not enough for the people. It takes less than a week for one supply, and then maybe the next supply may be even 3 or 4 months. I think that's my question. So what is your plan for that? And why is it that, what plan do you have for the equal distribution of the food, because based on the number of people or the population? Thank you.
Honorable Sears.
Honorable Speaker, I'll take the question by Senator Abbas. First, on the food distribution, and this is based on reports that are prepared by the National Drought Management Authority and the county steering groups, but the distribution is based on the population at the sub-county level. And when we get that data, because some sub-counties are vast, and sparsely populated, while some are heavily populated. So we receive that data from both at the sub-county level, and that is validated by National Drought Management Authority, NDMA, and that informs how much food and how much the rice and the beans, how much should then be sent to the county. It is a fact that we cannot have enough food because of the limited resources and a tight fiscal space. So based on the resources that are available and the food we procure, we try to balance and just do the best we can with what is available. We are cognizant that cash transfer has less logistics, doesn't have transport costs, because, Mr. Speaker, relief food distribution is a whole operation in terms of food, vehicles, logistics, records, and all that. Cash transfer would be the way to go. Currently, we do both. Cash transfer at a smaller scale, the programs that are in place, some of them supported by the development partners. We are looking at this to see how we can spread this to more counties than currently we have, so that in future we have more cash transfers and the relief food becomes less, and to reach pockets that are really needy or pockets that deserve the actual food rather than the cash transfer. So working together with the support we are receiving from the development partners on these strategies of hunger safety net and also cash transfers, I will call it again a work in progress. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Karungo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I take this opportunity also to thank Madam Waziri because of her responses, which I feel satisfying. But I want to build up on a question that was asked by Senator Abbas, because I wanted to ask almost the same question. Mr. Speaker, you either have food or you don't. And there are factors that contribute towards that. Maybe lack of employment, lack of job, lack of access to food. But in this case, I know we are talking about famine. So when there is famine, that is long term. So I wanted the Madam CS to tell us, those who benefit from this program, how long do they get this kind of food distribution? What is the duration? Because if you're given food, and the drought is there for a few months, you need food for a longer period of time. Because, Mr. Speaker, I've noted some politicians are using this food distribution as a campaign tool, where this food is taken to an area, they're given 2 packets of rice, 1 bowl of beans, and they will never go back there again. So sometimes I wonder, how long will this person benefit from this kind of food? And do we have data? You know, like we do monitoring. Yes, we give this person food, and what is the success story? And finally, Mr. Speaker, instead of giving cash, because I know the cash is there, instead of buying this food directly and distributing to the people, why don't you come with food vouchers? You know, this will encourage business people from that area to go where the food is, buy it, go back to their home, and sell it to their communities through these vouchers. If you remember very well, when there was famine in the northern side of this country, potatoes were rotting in Nyandarua. There was plenty of food in Nyandarua. So if these people had maybe cash or maybe the vouchers, somebody will just go, from that area and just buy this food and take it home to sell to their people. That way you promote business. You also give them an idea to see other places in this country. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Madam CS.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'll take the question by Senator Karungo. And in response to the first question, I wish to confirm that during the drought, or between January and May, when I've been handling this docket, and I believe even previously, relief food is sent to the sub-counties at a duration of 30 days or every month, depending on the quantities available and the availability. So we distribute every month. I also want to say that the process of food distribution, the targeting of the vulnerable, the work at the county level by the county steering committee never changes. We have a policy and a program in place. If you see leaders or other people during food distribution, I believe they're just witnessing or participating in that program. But our program is firmly documented and it follows through. And we copy, whenever we distribute food, we copy of all the leaders and we copy elected leaders, and they have the discretion to go witness, either for confirmation, for witnessing, or just participating with the communities. We have the data of the food we have distributed since February, and that is available, and that shows per sub-county, per county, and every area, including the quantities. And we also get returns at the county level. After every distribution, we have the returns, which we then study and see what observations and confirmations or queries or questions that we may have or clarifications to seek. Mr. Speaker, on the food vouchers, I wish to say that today we have received valuable input on how to manage these drought issues relief food. Though our markets, especially in the ASAL areas, are not fully developed to a level of having food vouchers, this is a good idea. I will task the technical teams to look at the proposals we have received today, including the proposal about the food vouchers, because we must improve, we must make it easier logistically, we must make it more efficient, we must make it more effective, and above all, we must uphold the highest levels of dignity, even as we intervene to support vulnerable communities. I thank you.
Thank you. Last but not the least, Senator Charlie Samson, Kiplotich.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sir, mine is, I think colleagues have asked, but just to ask the CS, is on the issue whether he had a discussion. You remember, Mr. Speaker, sir, a few years ago, the former Jubilee administration removed what we call strategic grain reserve. I don't know the CS of EAC and ASOL areas, whether they have had a discussion with the Ministry of Agriculture with the view of reviving strategic grain reserve. Because in Nandi, for example, where I come, there is always milk clot. When we harvest our maize, we always, and you remember what we said in November last year, Mr. Speaker, we have beans. Other colleagues here, you have talked about mango beans in Machakos. We have many other products that, if it can be put under strategic grain reserve, Mr. Speaker, sir, it would be very important in terms of food security. And food security, Mr. Speaker, is one of the core agenda of the Kenya Kwanza administration. So could the CS be gracious enough to provide information on the way of ensuring that strategic grain reserve is in place, and whether she did request either through her colleague, Senator Mithika Linturi, or herself to get budget allocation for operation of strategic grain reserve in the Republic of Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Madam CS.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are at such a time in this country that we haven't had sufficient food, leave alone a reserve. But having said that, we are having conversations with the Ministry of Agriculture, but first, to have sufficient food, and then have agriculture and farming and production that can have a reserve, that can have leftover. Looking at the activities and what the government is doing, the current administration, in terms of agriculture, providing fertilizer, encouraging farmers to farm, promoting irrigation, all those activities, I believe will stabilize the current need for food sufficiency, and we will then get into strategic food reserves. We'll have to produce enough to eat first. Currently, we are net, so to speak, we are on debit. We have to balance that, get a credit, and get to the strategic food reserves. I want to say positively that there are active discussions going on with the Ministry of Agriculture and other players and government officials, and at the opportune time, we will be glad to update members on the progress being made in this regard. And we look forward to start with to getting a bumper harvest based on the rains we have received and the activities we have seen, more enthusiastic farming that we have witnessed even as we go across the country. And we are hopeful that we will achieve this aspiration of having strategic food reserves that can sustain the country even during some of the worst droughts, like the one we have seen in recent times. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam CS. I can see on my screen two senators again. Chalagay, do you have a, no, you can't ask two questions. Sorry? No, you cannot ask two questions, Akona. Sorry? On what you have asked about the green reserve? You are not satisfied with the answer given. Do you have enough grains to keep in the stores as a strategic grain? 30 seconds, kindly.
I think, Madam CS, in the interest of time, I think what I requested, I appreciate that we might not have enough food in the country to sustain, but I wanted the CS to give practical steps into reopening and functionality of strategic grain reserve. That was my question. Not about, I know there is the aspect of food security, food sustainability, and my only concern was whether, in consultation with the Ministry of Agriculture, the operationalization and functionality and reopening of strategic grain reserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Madam CS, do you have something to add on that?
Mr. Speaker, I would request that we have a more comprehensive conversation with the Ministry of Agriculture, who is one of the strategic or the most strategic and key player in this conversation so that to enable us have more detailed and comprehensive responses to that question.
Senator Mohammed Chute, do you want to close with a comment? Because you exhausted your two questions.
No, I didn't, Mr. Speaker. The final one was this one now. I asked only one question. I asked only one question.
On the CSEAC?
I asked
or
only...
a different CS?
No, no.
Is it a different matter? Or
No, the same matter. I asked one question, and the last one I'm asking now, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Madam CS, for your good answers. I wanted to know if the CS is aware that Kenya Kwanza campaigns, in the Kenya Kwanza campaigns, the president was propagating the spirit of bottom-up. I wanted to know if the CS has any plans to pre-qualify distributors or suppliers from the 47 counties, so that with that pre-qualification, a supplier from Marsabit can supply goods from the nearest point, like Meru or Nyahururu, so that the cost of food, cost of transport will come down. Madam CS, you are aware that we have challenges in some counties and sub-locations because currently you are using trailers, 30-ton trailers to transport food, and it cannot go inside the locations. So what plans do you have, Madam, to pre-qualify suppliers from the 47 counties, even if, let's say, if you can have 5 or 6 suppliers from each counties to supply food rations to their respective counties? Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
CS.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I will respond to the intervention by Senator Chute. The current procurement process is open to everybody to participate. However, it is certainly a very good suggestion to involve the local, micro, small, and even medium enterprises and even individuals in participating in the supply of relief food and other humanitarian commodities. And this is in keeping with the Kenya Kwanza's ideology of bottom-up economic transformation. And the manifesto, the Kenya Kwanza manifesto, promised to actually provide even opportunities, even a fund to cater for the MSMEs and individuals as a deliberate effort to support them and to grow them and to support their businesses. So including that category in the supply of relief food at the local levels resonates perfectly with the current administration's ideology. And therefore, based on our discussions today, I will ask the technical officers to interrogate the current status and the current process to see how best we can include this category and promote the bottom-up business agenda and include the macro, the micro, and small and medium enterprises in the list of suppliers, but of course, without disrupting the existing rhythms, the decorums, and promoting efficiency, and above all, also the best cost that will be available. And so we will take this up and have the technical teams, the procurement teams, come up with modalities of entrenching this into the current procurement process and the current supplier list of who can supply the relief food, even at the local level. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam CS. You know, it is very strange. I've been here for quite some time. I've hosted CSs, but you are very special members are prodding you. Yeah? So that means, Madam CS, you have handled that question properly. I actually saw the answer that you give, the document, which is very satisfactory. We would really encourage as a house other CSs to follow suit. Lakini unajua Kiswahili inasema mgema akisifiwa tembo ulitia maji. So make sure, Madam CS, you maintain the standard, and so that we can be able to develop this country. When I was sitting there, was the Meru sitting as a senator for Meru County. I also had a question, but now I cannot be able to take a part in asking you questions when I'm chairing. So I'll get some time and come to your office for my question, so that also I can be able to serve the Meru community properly. So I want to thank you for your time and officers, and now we have exhausted the questions, so we want to release you so that you can go proceed and serve other Kenyans at your office. Kindly escort the CS. Also, she can pass by the Speaker's office for a cup of tea if she is interested. Thank you very much indeed, Madam CS. Let's go to the next order. The Honorable Senators, in the public gallery, we have 143 pupils. Are they still there? Oh, they have left, but I want to acknowledge the Buruburu and Sitam schools in Buruburu. They are absent, but in absentia, I want to really have welcomed them in the Senate. Thank you very much. Next order.
Order number 8, motion, state of mental health of police officers.
This is a resumption of debate, Senator Tobiko, and a balance of 8 minutes. She's not around. What is your point of order, meanwhile, Senator Chalgei?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Looking at amended standing orders 51, Mr. Speaker, I thought we should have, I know there is a ruling you have made, and I'm raising understanding order number 1. Because looking, Mr. Speaker, as you retreat to write your ruling, I'm not reopening or varying your ruling. You need to give us direction, because the next statement that is meant for CS trade has been synonymous with the question time. So,
But,
Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chali, have your seat. Resume your seat, kindly. That matter was well addressed by the Speaker, my colleague, when he was here.
I was raising understanding number 1.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm giving you guidance that matter is well placed. It will be canvassed tomorrow at a high-level meeting, which will make some conclusions. So wait for the communication. Senators, I cannot see. Senator Chalege, you want to contribute to this motion?